for sure wanted to talk to my fashion girl because I need to.
Yeah, girlfriend, let's talk about it.
So, welcome to our podcast, Detroit is This through Detroitisit. And Roslyn, I'm so happy and so proud and so honored that you're joining us for this. There's so much going on. So, we'll be chatting for the next 45 minutes, a little bit about you, your background, kind of the comings into Detroit and what Detroit means for you. And then, of course, business, and then all the craziness that the world is going through and how you're sort of working through these things as we all are. We're all small businesses. We're women-owned businesses. We're, we kind of all know Detroit in a way. So I would love to just chat for the next couple minutes about your background and who's Roslyn and your inspiration and things that kind of turn you on and where you came from.
Sure. Well, I'm Roslyn, and I'm the founder of Detroit is the New Black. And, I have had kind of a windy path to Detroit and also in my career, but just really grateful that I landed here in the city. So I'm from Seattle, Washington originally, born and raised. I went to Howard University, so I moved to DC when I was 18 for college, and I majored in fashion merchandising. I had actually started, I guess, my retail career in Seattle at Nordstrom, sort of the flagship store downtown. So kind of,
I love their shoe department.
I mean, Nordstrom's good, and it's one of those stores that it's like the flagship store downtown is
amazing.
All of it. And so that's just where I sort of was bitten by this retail bug, it's a culture of retail at Nordstrom. And so that's where I started in the stock room of men's suits. That was like my first job. And then it was so silly. I used to take tickets for the tailors, so when they were down to like measure the guys, I would have my pad and he's like, 2 off the hem. I'm like, 2 off the hem. I felt like I was in Paris. So that's where I started.
I love it.
And then
I used to work in coats at Saks, so I
used to buy coats for Saks. So we'll get there.
It's so funny. I love it.
So I went to Howard. I majored in fashion merchandising. I moved to New York after I graduated and started in the buying office for Saks Fifth Avenue. I went through their sort of training program and spent time in several different departments, ended up in women's outerwear.
No kidding.
Yeah, so
we literally might have been crossing me a little earlier, but might have been crossing paths along the way. So funny.
It's so funny. Coats is such a interesting department, and one now that's kind of dated, right? Because coats are in the collections. It's not like people are making outerwear at the department anymore.
Separately, right.
Anyway, so that was that, and then I lived in Singapore for a year after Saks. So I worked as like an international buyer, retail consultant for a conglomerate called Rocket Internet. They're German based. But what they do is develop these e-commerce startups around the world. And so they were developing a fashion aggregate based in Southeast Asia, and it was headquartered in Singapore. So I went there to basically source international brands. So I would bring in, like a Aldo from Canada, or like a River Island from London, or just kind of sourcing brands from around the world to come to Southeast Asia. So it was really incredible. And then I moved to Detroit.
So just a question though, on that end, was that around the time that Alibaba was starting? Do you know if Alibaba was maybe after?
What year was that? What year was Alibaba?
Alibaba and Tencent in that world was probably about 10, 12 years ago. Maybe before. Yeah.
That was a little before. So I was in Singapore. I moved there, I think 2011, 2012 time.
Okay.
So a little bit before, but e-commerce was very new in Southeast Asia. So it was kind of like, in the Philippines and Vietnam, like they didn't yet have access to e-com and certain fashion brands. Now you're able to get American Apparel and, the corner remote island of the Philippines. So it was really interesting, just like logistically, how do you get the product there at the price point after all of the duties and taxes? Also, from a brand recognition standpoint, what does this brand mean now translating in this different country with a different culture, a different religion? All these different things. So it was really interesting from just like a cultural standpoint and how do brands translate around the world. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved to Detroit in 2013. And I came with my ex, a boy. Boy brought me to Detroit.
Love brought you here. Love brought you here.
Of course, and love kept me here. I fell in love with this city, and he and I split, but I was just so enamored with Detroit, and people here were so special and interesting, and it just was an adventure. So I stayed, and I had this T-shirt. I had this idea for Detroit is the New Black, and I remember when I first moved here. This was 2013, and Whole Foods had just opened, like in Midtown. Wow. And I'm like, there it is. There's always a signifier or something that says, gentrification or the city is changing. And so I'm like, okay, Detroit's happening. Like, Whole Foods is here. They don't mess around. So what does the future of this city look like, and who's included in that future? And so just coming from kind of a merchandising background, I knew that Detroit Pride, like T-shirts were a thing, and, people were very proud of the city. And so obviously there was like Detroit Voices Everybody, then there was Detroit Hustles Harder. And I'm like, oh God, like, do we need another Detroit T-shirt? Like, I didn't want to, like, I definitely didn't want to be, that girl, but I just thought there was a new narrative, and one that wasn't a message that wasn't out there just yet. And it's like, I really fell in love with Detroit, and I was coming from, these larger cities and just a more sort of cosmopolitan vibe of a city. And I really saw Detroit as aligning with that. Detroit felt very cosmopolitan or very international in the way that, the people are and the art, is here. And I just felt outsiders should have more a higher view of Detroit than kind of what they did at that time, which was bankruptcy, which was corruption, which was poverty. So I'm like, how do we change that narrative first? So really adding this E over Detroit, Detroit, which really takes it back to its French roots and it being founded by the French, and just rethinking about what does this cosmopolitan city look like. And then you have the New Black, which was obviously this new cool hip city, but somehow when you put Detroit in front of the New Black, it takes on a racial connotation, and there's this interesting sort of double entendre that starts to bubble in people's minds. Well, what does that mean? And is that racist? And I'm white, can I wear it? And where are the Black people in New Detroit? And it just starts to spark this conversation. And so that was how it started, and I started selling them kind of like at different markets around the city, and just here and there, and they would sell out, and people would talk to me about it, and people were angry, people were happy, it just sparked all these different emotions. And I'm like, okay, this is a brand, like people are responding and they're reacting in a really emotional way. And so how do I, build on this brand narrative, and what does that look like? So that's how it started.
When you went into it and when you started this idea of the name for Detroit is New Black, were you anticipating then? So this is what, 2013?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Were you anticipating kind of the provocation? Were you looking forward to that sort of sense of what's the next conversation going to be around that? Yeah, you needed that.
Oh, I'm a troll, like I'm the worst kind of troll, it's like this, it's this dark and light brand, it's like I like to have real conversations, and I like to just like be blunt and like go there. But it's easy, you know, it doesn't mean it has to be attacking or it has to be uncomfortable. Sure. It's like, let's just talk about it. Like, totally. We're people, guys, you know, like what's happening here? And totally. So that's like the spirit, you know, of the brand is this dark and light, you know, positive, negative, this duality that I think exists in all of us. So certainly, you know, it's this idea of being provocative, but really just sparking a conversation, you know, not really putting it out there for people to talk about what it means to them. And so people ask me all the time, well, what does it mean? And it's like, well, how do you interpret it? You know, I can tell you what it means to me as a Black woman, as someone who's actually not even from Detroit, as someone who came to Detroit, to New Detroit, whatever that means. So I think even my experience within Detroit is a unique one, you know? So it's open for interpretation.
Bigger picture, I'm talking life picture. You know, you have this idea that maybe you can choose who you're born into. I'm talking sort of ecosystem of life, or you're born to parents and you have no choice. You know, a friend of mine, I remember I was born in Croatia and my family's Croatian and we came as immigrants in the 60s, me a little bit later. But I remember friends of my mom's, a friend would say, if only I was born 50, you know, kilometers across the way, it would have been Italy, for example.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm talking ex-Yugoslavia. Yeah. You know, we really, depending on what your viewpoint is, we as humans, you, Roslyn, me, Ivana, and friends, we don't have a choice, you know, who we're born into, i.e., I think, you know, the color of your skin and such is not, you're not choosing it. I'm not choosing if I'm white or purple or black or yellow or brown or whatever the case is. You aren't either.
Yep.
Unless you believe that you choose your parents and your parents choose you, which is of course a possibility. But given those circumstances, then in life, it becomes about the mindset and what you do with who you are. And of course, the messaging that you were given as a child as you grow up has a lot of impact on that as well. Sure. So as you were growing up and being that you were, you know, and I was as well, but you in particular, you were really given a lot of opportunity to see different viewpoints and live in different ecosystems, and some smaller, some larger. And then coming into a city like Detroit, where you say that it is pretty international as you were coming into it, there's also a sentiment that Detroit is pretty insular, that it is about Detroit, and it is, you know, Detroiters know best. And I've lived here my whole life, around Detroit since I was 3. So I'm a Detroiter with pride. How do you, you know, how do you kind of make those ends meet? Because you are a Black woman that's, I don't know your age, but let's say 25.
Forever.
Right? You know, beautiful, smart, intelligent, capable, obviously an entrepreneur that's doing the best that you can within the situation and successful. You know, how do you sort of interpret the sort of ecosystem that we're in within Detroit, putting aside the brand? We'll talk about that in a second, but like you, Roslyn, like what do you see what's going on?
You know, I think it's like, I really consider myself kind of like an observer of culture, you know, like I'm not like a super social person, whether it be on social media or in real life, you know, I'm just kind of like watching. And it's like growing up, I've just been in so many culturally different environments. You have Seattle, which is kind of its own, you know, thing. When I was growing up there, kind of very hippie, you know, hippy dippy and chill and Pacific Northwesty, outdoorsy, you know, and that's how I grew up. And now Seattle's very different. It's gone a little bit more tech and kind of more expensive, and so it's changed too. But, you know, there's Seattle. And also, you know, speaking of parents, it's like my parents are different. My mom actually is a little person, so she's a dwarf.
No kidding. I mean, I don't know why you know, there's all types of people, but I don't know if I've ever met anybody in person that has Really? So you can, it's little person, or she's a little person.
She's a little person. I mean, it's a dwarf, technical term, right? But I mean,
wow.
call them little people. And so, you know, even that, it's like, you know, you're born into a family, you know, you have a mother who's different and you're a child. And so kids, you know, make you different in places, or you're looked at differently, or in public, you know, you're looked at. So I just think, you know, growing up, I was just like, conditioned for inclusivity, you know, and for just people, acceptance. You know, and just understanding people from even before, you know, I could talk or could communicate well. It's like I could read energies in rooms, you know, like I could go in and know how someone was feeling, or know if someone's uncomfortable, or if someone feels excluded, or whatever it is. And so there's that just kind of empath nature, you know, that was just like built into me. And so, you know, that's how I grew up. And then I went to Howard, which is a Black school, right? So I'm going from Seattle with, you know, a completely different demographic to a historically Black college and university, which is a completely different thing. And then you have New York, which is, you know, its own.
Yeah. So on Howard, out of curiosity, and I'm asking this as a friend and as a woman, did you choose Howard because it was a Black university? Did you choose Howard because you felt a assimilation to what you wanted to be close to, because of the school itself, all of the above? What do you think? What do you know?
I think, well, primarily it was because it was a Black school and it was the best. So, you know, if ever there were a Black Harvard or you know, whatever.
No, I know a lot of people that went to Howard that are incredible. Yeah. It's an amazing school.
It was the best. And so I really wanted that Black experience. I didn't have that growing up necessarily. When I went to an African Methodist Episcopal church, AME church, so I grew up with that Black church heritage, but socially, you know, in school or otherwise, I didn't have that. So I did choose Howard because it was Black, and because I knew, you know, culturally, it was just a really important network that I wanted to be a part of.
And this is, you know, no judgment call on anybody, because I think we all, humans, I think, just like all animals and species, I believe we evolved to who we are, on my take. And I just had that conversation with a very dear friend of mine that believes the exact opposite, which is fascinating. A brilliant person as well, believes that's not the case, that evolution was not how we got here. I mean, it's just fascinating to me how people, you know, how we all think in different ways and believe different things.
Yeah.
But we actually, as a aggregate, for better, for worse, and I don't think there's a fault to that, we aggregate to our tribe.
Yeah.
Many, you know, I was actually called out on this on one of our other podcasts, where I said that I don't see color. I truly don't. I don't think I do. But then they pointed out, but the fact that I'm even mentioning that there's color in the sentence, and maybe the point of what I'm saying is I don't see the differentiation in people. I love you or I don't. Either like you or you don't, or you're either great at what you do and we do something together or not, and I'm purple and you're green. It doesn't matter to me.
Right.
But it has a lot to do with upbringing, definitely, and the circumstances that you're in. But what I'm getting at is we're also, as I get older, unfortunately, you can see that you're also drawn to your own tribe, no matter what that is, whether it's, you know, a Black school for you, whether it's, you know, Croatian heritage for me. I could care less, for example, about Croatian churches as I was growing up in America. But the older that I get, I'm really feeling a tendency to go into my cultural heritage. And I think it's natural. I think those are beautiful things that a lot of us need to start learning to be okay with, for everybody to find their own puzzle piece.
Right. I think that's spot on. And I think, you know, as I get older, I even see myself, you know, returning to some of those specific roots, or those, you know, really sort of crunchy granola, Birkenstock, like outdoorsy sort of vibe. And historically that hasn't been culturally Black, you know? So it's something that, from an identity standpoint, even from a fashion standpoint, it's like, okay, what media and what society is telling me is Black culture, you know, is not necessarily how I was conditioned or what my environment informed, you know, growing up. So where does that leave me? You know, and I think the brand,
very interesting.
I think the brand is like such an exact expression of that in terms of it being very much of a bridge between Black and white culture, or, you know, both the demographics feeling comfortable in the brand. And it is Black owned and Black led, but there's something really accessible, you know, to the brand, that even if, you know, and in my head, I thought it would be like FUBU or like the next urban wear brand. I'm like, this is Black, everyone knows it is, but honestly, our customer base is 50-50 almost, you know, almost exactly.
So talking about brand, because fashionista, you know, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I had a magazine called Clear Magazine that was a pretty well known that
you know, Emin.
Yeah, so we co-founded Clear Magazine. So I was a co-founding editor, and we started in '99, and on and on. So fashion and design and lifestyle and luxury has been in my blood for ages. And we did a lot of work within the fashion space in a big way. Out of Detroit, we're based in Royal Oak when Royal Oak was considered Detroit. This is, you know, ages ago now. But when I look at Detroit as the New Black, you have brands that you carry, for example, like Tory Burch, or you might still, and others that weren't necessarily Black brands. And then how do they, you know, what did they, so from a merchandising perspective, and as you're bringing in lines, for example, Black or white, or no matter where they're from, what do they think, like when they see the name Detroit is the New Black? Do they think of you as a retailer? Do they think of you as a brand? Do they think of you as a Detroit-based brand? Like, what do they think when they start learning about you?
I mean, they think that we are just kind of the fashion filter, I guess, for Detroit, right? So we're kind of that entry point. So we didn't carry Tory Burch. We carried like Helmut Lang, for instance. And so, you know, they don't have distribution sort of downtown Detroit. They're carried out at Somerset and a couple of, you know, larger department stores, but nothing local. And so a lot of them are looking for a local sort of foot on the ground in terms of distribution, but also many of them are trying to align, you know, with more culturally relevant brands. And so right now, obviously Black is a thing and Black is hot. And so, you know, they want to know like how they can be a part of an organization that kind of already has that narrative happening. And so, but looking at us as it's weird, you know, like I'm not a designer. And so I started with the t-shirts, and Time magazine did this thing like Detroit's hottest designer. And I'm like, yikes, I'm not, you know, like I'm not that. And what are people going to expect? Right. So it's like I'm a merchandiser, and the brand, you know, is something that I've created merch on the back of this idea, which is a retail concept. And I think that's how outside brands look at it. Like they look at Detroit is New Black as a hyper-local retail concept that has an in-house label or merchandise that essentially markets the concept, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, and not many people do that in retail. I mean, you know, you don't have like, you know, Nordstrom's is, you know, the hottest, you know, business or whatever brand on a t-shirt, you know, not, you know, I don't know, maybe Gap would have back in the day, you know, it's not like you see ancient news already, but it's not like Barney's, because you're a multi-brand store.
Right. But it's like Macy's, I mean, they have private labels, right?
Yeah, but that's different. That's different. Yeah. Because you're actually branding the brands through your merch. That's your custom merch, while you're also carrying other merchandise of other global brands. So there aren't many, maybe Supreme kind of a scenario. Opening ceremony. Yeah. Who I know those guys. I love it. And they're not around anymore. I don't know if you've heard that.
They're not.
Yeah. But yeah, no, there's, Not many, even like Colette and Paris didn't do that. I mean, they did collaborative partnerships, but they didn't really do what you're doing, which is a standalone brand as a sort of streetwear concept, let's say, or practical brand that then has also merch that you're building out around it through other brands.
Right.
But you brought up actually a really interesting point. So let's say the Helmut Langs of the world that's not Black owned. And there's 1,000,001 other brands that we can name that are not. Do you think that some of these brands would be tying into what you're doing from a merch perspective because they want to get in on the trend of being supportive of Black business?
Helmut, that wasn't the case for Helmut. They came on board last year sometime before all of this. But I think there are definitely some brands now that are, bandwagon and trying to jump on the Black trend wherever they can in terms of collaboration. So I think that is happening. But I think the brands that kind of come to us or that we curate, I think are just really excited about sort of this diverse retail concept, or sort of this this concept that's being led by a different perspective and a Black perspective. And it's not so heavy-handed in terms of like, we are Black, we're not leading with Black, it's good first, and then it happens to be Black owned. So there's a perspective there that's going to kind of output a different project. And I think a lot of the designers we work with just want to be a part of that, a part of retail done differently, and I think that's why they work with us.
And I think I heard through the platform and through other sources that you had some pretty great support that you were getting while these protests were going on downtown, and walk us through what that was like.
It was great. I mean, we had a local team called We Are Culture Creators who came out and helped us board up the shop, and then we did like a block party where some artists came out and did installation on the plywood, which was really beautiful. In support of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the protests that are going on. And obviously we're downtown on the high street, right? So like the Fifth Avenue of Detroit, and one of the only Black owned businesses down here. And so because we have such an important footprint, like it's important for me to make sure that we're raising the issues, or we're bringing those conversations to this street, because if we don't, who else will talk about it? So that's been huge for us. And also we've recently partnered with the Boys and Girls Club as well as Bedrock to kind of rethink about our space as an industry club, because the store it isn't straight retail. It's not like a Shinola or a Lululemon. We're not just selling clothes or items per square foot. We're actually doing community programming and activations through the space. So we do a retail accelerator program where we take applications for local businesses to be in the space. We do like a poetry night. We do a music showcase throughout the summer. We do networking events and artist exhibitions, yoga classes. So it's more about how can the community, tap in downtown and be a part of what's happening outside of them being just customers for our merchandise. And so that concept, requires a different financial structure. It requires, a different way of acquiring physical space, because it isn't just for retail space. It's more of this cultural center or community center. And so with the support of those new partners, we'll kind of be reintroducing, what does this industry club look like? How do we start including youth from the neighborhoods, from the Boys and Girls Club? How can they come downtown and work in the store and intern in retail and be a part of, the development that's happening downtown that may or may not reach into the neighborhoods otherwise? So for me, it's about providing access, and our space really being an access point for Black, white, purple, whoever to come in and really converge together.
So if you look at the Detroit fashion ecosystem, and fashion designers, considering that, we know, especially you now being in Detroit for a couple of years, a lot of us know that design is really pretty central to the history of Detroit, from automotive design, obviously, but also furniture. Mid-century started in Southeast Michigan, globally. There's a great program that's coming out of CCS, College for Creative Studies, on the fashion department side. I'm sure you probably know Aki that's over there too, who's a mutual friend, I'm sure. What do you think of sort of the future of what's going on the fashion side with brands? There's some brands that are trying to start up their thing within Detroit. What do you think as a merchandiser and as a retailer and as a potential home to some of these, brands that are coming out? There's also a new merchandising center that's coming out of manufacturing center that's coming out of Michigan and Detroit, originated out of New York. There's a lot of talk about a lot of opportunity. What do you think about the sort of design sense for fashion within Detroit?
I think the design sense is 100% there. I think Detroit has some of the best creatives in the world. I actually, I've been teaching at Wayne State for the past couple of years in their fashion merchandising program. And so just to see, the youth and the ideas and the talent that is coming out of Detroit, I think that's definitely there. The infrastructure, right, and how Detroit fits into the larger national and even global fashion ecosystem, I think that part is yet to be seen. I think, there aren't a lot of, how do I want to say, it's not big enough yet. I think there are several pockets here and there, and there's a bit of expertise here, a bit of expertise there. But I think, a lot of creatives that leave Detroit don't necessarily come back all the time. And so we really need those that have gone off and, been trained elsewhere or worked in global industry to bring that talent back to help build these new manufacturing centers or teach at, these programs at CCS and Wayne State. So I think the raw talent is here. I think the infrastructure is going to be the challenge, and how scalable that is. I think that's something we'll see. But there are a lot of really small brands that are good. And I think a lot of them, including myself, are trying to figure out local supply chain. And so the sooner, like in Isaac, Industrial Sewing and Innovation Center, things like that, the sooner those things can kind of get up and running and be able to support the local designers and local brands with manufacturing and local production, I think the sooner we'll have a real idea of how successful this fashion scene can be locally.
Are you tied into what's going on at CCS also with their fashion accessories department in particular?
Yeah, I know Aki well. And so I've done some guest lectures there, and, a part of their sort of graduate show and stuff like that. And so I think, again, there's talent there. I think the students, they graduate and it's kind of like, where do I go? Like, where can I manufacture my collection? Do I need to move to New York? Do I need to go to LA or whatever it is? So I think there has to be somewhere for the local creative talent to grow in Detroit.
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
No, so if you are a local designer that's here, what would you, and I come to you, let's say I'm the local designer and I'm out of school and I have an idea for a fashion brand and a fashion line. What would you suggest, given your international experience? Do you suggest to me, for example, Ivana, I think it might make sense for you to take off to New York, the health situations aside, but take off to New York to get some experience? Or would you say, hone it into what you've got and look at the ecosystem of what you have in front of you and make the best of what we have here to build out your brand? What would you suggest?
That's a hard one.
And each situation is different, of course.
I think traveling is just you gain so much. Even for students that take a gap year before college, I think that experience is just invaluable. So if a student can leave here and come back, I think they'll just gain so much. Outside of fashion, just life perspective, which influences fashion. But if they can, I don't think it's 100% necessary to leave. I think there's a ton of, is that my phone? Sorry, what's okay.
I'm like, that's okay.
Weird. Sorry.
No worries.
I think there's a ton of opportunity in Detroit in a way that doesn't exist in a New York or elsewhere. Just because there's the space, there's the artistic inspiration from Detroit, industrial inspiration from Detroit. And I think at the end of the day, for new designers, it's about getting your product to market and sales. You know, does it work? Does the product work? Do people want it? Does your customer base respond? And I think you can test that anywhere. And so I tell local designers, you know, start at these local marketplaces, you know, get your online happening, get your social media going. It's like really understand what is the appetite for this brand you're developing before, you know, planning out this whole collection that you're not even sure it's the right thing. So
like God bless Eastern Market on Saturdays. You can literally like thousands, God knows, what is it, 40,000 or something people that walk through there a weekend, you know, go there, right? Shop it out.
I started there. I started on the marketplace circuit, and it's like you can literally start with 20 t-shirts, and whatever you make that day, buy some more and do it again. Try some new colors and just grow it from the ground up. You know, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs or startup fashion companies about, you know, investment and VC capital and all this stuff, and it's like sometimes you don't need money, you know, like you need to build a customer base, you need to build sales and put that back into your company and see how long you can bootstrap it before you really require a strategic partner. So that's my advice. Start where you are.
So back to you on your business. Did you have an investor in the business?
I did. And still do. I have a small equity partner who came on board back in 2016. Has been obviously a tremendous help and allowed me to get, you know, to Woodward Avenue and build the store out. So that's been huge for us. And you know, partnership is tricky too, making sure it's the right partner and
So do you feel a sense, because it sounds like it's a fiscal partner also, which completely makes sense. Do you think that adds more responsibility on your end, without going into details, but also for small businesses, I think it's critical to know because you're living through it. Does it add more responsibility on your end as a business owner to make sure that what you're doing for the equity partner, that makes sense for them too?
Yeah, it's definitely more accountability, you know, and less freedom. But I think sometimes you need those checks and balances, and you need more than your eyes on it and more than your ideas on it. You really have to cross-check that with, does it make business sense? And when you're a founder, you're emotionally connected to it. So, you know, you think it's the best idea, and sometimes it's just not. It's just not. So
you're like, what? You mean that fountain I was going to put out there in the middle of like Woodward, it's not going to work?
Right. Exactly. Exactly that.
No, I hear you. So as you're looking at, because you're literally in the mix of everything that's going on downtown, you are smack dab. I mean, if anyone is more central, it's like nobody, it's you. You're a small business, women owned, Black owned, global, local now, you know, self-starting entrepreneur. What do you make of what's going on with now? I mean, with the coronavirus and the business, let alone the protests, which are subsiding in a way. And I have to say, I think the protest should continue forever until changes are made. So I'm a proponent of that mindset. But what's your take on like today, tomorrow?
I think the protests are continuing. I think they're just not on the streets anymore in the way that they were.
Right.
They're continuing in the workplace. They're continuing at boardrooms, you know, like people are really making real changes. And so what I'm making of it is just, it's an opportunity to reset, you know. It's like the whole world was doing things a certain way because that's how we've been doing it. But because of technology, just because of our political situation, it's like we're going into a different world. And so we have to restructure our businesses to be viable in the new world. And I think that COVID break we had was just a moment for a lot of small businesses to recalibrate and say, okay, what's working, what's not? Let's, you know, trim the fat here and figure out how we can go forward lean and strong and leave behind all of these things that weren't working. And so that's what, you know, how I've looked at it. It's been a welcome break, or just kind of a welcome slow down. And certainly for retailers to think about what's the future of retail. And that's sort of where this industry club activation developed, because it's like, you know, spaces are about activations, are about placemaking, they're about community. And so, you know, we need to turn retail on its head and start looking at how you activate those retail spaces really to drive online, right? So the space is more marketing and it's more of an engagement center. But the sales, you know, focus should really be about online. And so that's kind of how we've restructured in this time.
So with online, and because we're doing quite a bit also in our end, which I filled you in a little bit, and I'll hopefully share with you a little bit more as we evolve. But if you look at online, I don't know, from Net-a-Porter to you name the online retail shopping experience, there's always the challenge of touching and feeling and the shape and the size, of course, and does it fit, doesn't it fit, and am I a 2 or am I a 4, am I an 8 or a 10? How do you handle that then now because online shopping is online shopping? I mean, it's great on one hand because you can buy anything, but on the other hand, as a shopper, you can also return anything. So, you know, you as a retailer, how do you look at that? How are you handling it?
I think, you know, it's tricky and I don't have it figured out just yet, but I do think what's going to sustain businesses going into the future is strong brand, right? And it's like a customer is buying the brand narrative and the meaning and the mission behind it more so than ever. And I think that's become more important to the customer than even the aesthetic of what it is they're buying. It's why am I buying it? Who's making it? Where are the proceeds going? Is it sustainable? It's like people want more information. So that's how I think about driving online. It's like I want people to read about our story through different press outlets or hear about the work that we're doing, and that really be their reason to buy and what's driving them to online. You know, and a lot of people don't even really wear our t-shirts or whatever. They just buy because they want to support. It's like an offering, you know. They go to the site and I've participated, I bought my shirt.
I have my shirt. I wear it all the time. I don't know why I didn't wear it today. I have my gray shirt. Detroitisit in black. I get stopped on it all the time. It's awesome.
Thank you. So that's how I think about navigating online. It's just making our offline story be powerful. You know, it's like we're not one of those brands that only exists online. It's like we're doing real work in real time. And that message spreads, you know, word of mouth. And that's kind of how we've grown to where we are. We've not done any paid, you know, marketing or advertising campaigns. It's all been, you know, organic growth. And I think that that's something that will really push us forward in the future.
How large is your team, your working team that you have?
Right now, me and one more person.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need more. No, I'm not. No judgment. I mean, we're super tiny as well.
Before COVID, we were at about 5, and then you know I laid really everyone off. We plan to reopen next week after the 4th of July. So, we'll see how many we can bring back, but it's a bootstrap, it's something that we really still are a small business, and trying to scale in the current economy, is our focus. So we're small.
So let's say also, if you're looking at potentially other cities, would you ever expand into another, city? Atlanta is the new black, or I don't know what, but
I don't know if it's the new black moment, I don't know if I want to go there. I think Detroit is the new black, it's definitive. Cool. It's the thing. It's its only thing. Cool. I think the model is interesting, and I think I'd be interested in going to another city and looking at their stuff, what's the landscape here, what makes sense, and maybe developing some sort of brand on the back of that. But doing this same concept, I think could be major in other cities as well.
So Detroit really is the new black.
Oh, it is, like, period. Like, there are nothing comes after
accent on the E, period, after black. Yeah, I'm with you. Roslyn, this was awesome. Awesome. You're a rock star. I'm so glad we made this happen and that you had the time and we had a chance to kind of deep dive into you and what you're doing there. And we're supporters. Detroitisit is a big supporter of what you're doing. And A, you're a woman. B, you're doing things in a completely inspirational way. And you're young and joyful and beautiful and lovely and smart. And we need you here.
Well, we need you, and thank you for the work you're doing too. I'm so inspired.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're in it together, right?
Okay, totally.
All right. So thank you so much for the time. This is great. All right. More to come. Take care, Roslyn. Bye.